Hey everyone, welcome to Yoga How To. I'm Austin Richmond. Today we're going to be talking about a unique perspective on yoga from the myth folklore of the King Arthur tales and how Merlin transformed a young Arthur into various types of animals to prepare him for his kingship. So what has this got to do with yoga? Let's take a look. Imagine a time when a wise mentor, Merlin, shapeshifted a young Arthur into various animals, each form holding a unique lesson that prepared him for his destiny as a king. Just as Arthur experienced different aspects of life through these transformations, each yoga posture invites us to embody a different state of being and to tap into distinct qualities of strength, flexibility, balance, and wisdom. In our yoga practice is much like a journey of transformation. Every asana that we embody, we perform as an opportunity to discover a new focus of ourselves, be it strength of the warrior, the serenity of the sage, or the agility of an animal. I got to go on a raft trip for the first time when I was 17 years old with, believe it or not, my gym class at high school. And I remember there was a safety manual given to us, and this quote was on the cover, and I've never forgotten it. If there is magic on this planet, it's contained in water. What our bodies are made of, some say 78, 98% of water. When Merlin turned Arthur into a fish, the lesson was about embracing fluidity. How water really needs to be respected as a soft guiding force, but also something that is a force of nature in and of itself. I love how this tethers into the yoga practice because, of course, there's the obvious vinyasa flow and how we're flowing from pose to pose. But if we break that down a little bit more, it makes us think about how there are a million poses in between two poses. And those transitions are opportunities for us to explore the sensation, the awareness, and the embracing of the fluidity. Another animal Merlin turned Arthur into was a bird, of course, and in yoga there's a ton of bird poses. There's pigeon poses, there's crow poses, there's crane poses, there's flamingo, I think is one now. Peacock, yes, for sure. The purpose of Merlin turning Arthur into this was to gain perspective, to gain a broader perspective, the 10,000-foot view, as we say. There are times where we're on the dance floor in life and we need to be present with what is at our fingertips, but there's other times where we need to take what's called the balcony view, or sometimes people prefer to call it the 10,000-foot view. I think that we discover this in yoga, especially when we're setting intention, when we're thinking about why we came to yoga in the first place. What is the inherent purpose and meaning? What are we there to serve? Essentially, taking on a broader perspective through asanas that don't necessarily have to be just the bird postures, but postures that shift our perspective, like handstand, headstand, or any other arm balance that puts us into the air, that disconnects us from the stability, the familiarity, and the comfort of earth. Starts to bring that perspective shift to mind. Then, of course, Merlin turns Arthur into a stag. His education is meant to be informed about the balance between strength and grace. Most famously, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, especially Yoga Sutra 2.46, Sthira Sukham Asanam, reminds us of this interplay between these two opposing forces. The sutra roughly or generically translates to yoga asana, or the postures of yoga, is established when we have equal balances of ease and effort. And so this is a great reminder for us that when we're in our yoga practice, if we are all effort, if we're all rigidity, if we're all basically just petrifying ourselves to achieve the pose, that we're not really establishing what Patanjali would call yoga asana. Conversely, if we are just a puddle, if we're giving way to too much ease, to too much relaxation, with no effort, and the effort doesn't necessarily always have to be physical, right? Like in a yin practice, the effort might be the focus, and the focus could be something as mechanical as the breath, but it could also be a bhavana, mindful practice, a meditative object that the teacher might inspire in the student. But the effort needs to be where we're not allowing the relaxation to encourage disassociation, laziness, doubt, our old habitual patterns. Remember, the yoga practice should be transforming us, just like Arthur gets transformed. And it's through these principles that we start to effectively stack enough of these experiences of mini transformations where they make a big transformation in our life off the mat. Some postures that I think really connect to the idea of this are, for one, tree pose, because we're grounding and everything that implies, such as rooting, stability, connecting to earth energy. Also maybe even considering grounding to be about discharging. But you're on one leg, and the goal isn't to be perfectly still. The goal is to allow the subtle movements, the twitching muscles to inform, like bits of data, where you are at in time and space, so that there is this interplay here now between two opposing forces of interoception, what's happening on the inside as the breath moves my body. Maybe this slight shift of my center of gravity is throwing me a little bit into a place where now my muscles have to make a slight adjustment to rearrange myself into the ecteroceptive reality, what's happening around me. Another pose where we see this balance between two opposing forces, specifically strength and grace, is Warrior Two. Such a difficult pose when you're first learning, specifically to hold your body at these end range emotions for a considerable amount of time, defying gravity and kind of leaning into not just muscular engagement, but muscular awareness and connective tissue. Over time, Warrior Two does get easier, and there is a grace that comes about with Warrior Two. The way in which, of course, it symbolically represents kind of the chopping off the head of the ego, if you're familiar with the old folklore of Virabhadra. But more specifically, how the subtle energy, the prana of Warrior Two, arises from the center and transfers out through Vijnana Vayu, transfers out through our whole subtle field, so that we feel this core of strength anchored from within us now being evenly spread out in a focused way throughout our entire being. And lastly, Merlin turns Arthur into a badger, which I just love the imagery of the honey badger and Arthur getting a real opportunity to learn about resilience. Even way back then, in this old medieval time, Dark Ages folklore, before we had the honey badger popularized, the badger still represented resilience and just not caring back then. Maybe it wasn't that it didn't care, but it wasn't going to let the things bother it that didn't need to be bothered. Of course, we can see why the obvious lesson of resilience is important for somebody to be a king. But in yoga, it's this concept of doing the hard thing. Yoga is not easy. If yoga was easy, everybody would do it. Most people I know who end up doing yoga do it because the other option just isn't tenable anymore. Doing the hard thing of yoga is easier than whatever it was in their life that got so eventually insufferable. And so when our teacher asks us to hold postures like Utkatasana, chair pose, and we're really sitting in the difficulty of how to maintain breath, how to maintain equanimity, all the while this heat, this challenge, this resistance starts to arise within us. What is it that gives us the resilience? And it's this consistency in practice, of a dedicated practice, that kind of bring all these things together. The fluidity, the perspective shift, the embracing the polar opposites, especially ease and effort, that give us over a long haul period of time a ability to contain the force and the fire of the yoga practice that we're most oftentimes working with, that can be summed up in the word of tapas. This is a Sanskrit word. Tapas can mean heat, can mean austerity, can mean zeal, can mean enthusiasm, but essentially it is resilience. It's the way in which we embrace the challenge, sometimes even embrace the suffering of something self-imposed, and we don't lose our anchor. We don't lose a locus of equanimity within that moment. We still find a way to stay sovereign. So Merlin was transforming Arthur physically so that he would eventually maintain a perspective shift, a different mentality when his physical form came back to human. And I love to map and project this mythic journey on top of what we're doing in yoga sometimes, because we are going on a quest. We are allowing ourselves to experience something out of our comfort zone, something that allows us growth, something that allows us the opportunity to heal, something that allows us the opportunity to learn. And these lessons are inherent. They're within us. The problem is if we stay within our comfort zones, if we just stay with what we know and who we think we are, we never really tap into the advantage of opportunity to optimize everything that we could be. And it's a real opportunity to write the story that helps map out how you're going to get from the point A in your life to the point B. And you get to choose what that point B is. That's kind of the purpose of yoga, and in a lot of ways is to empower you to take hold of your own destiny. And I love the more that you shapeshift on your mat, the more that you are willing and courageous enough to adopt different perspectives, different belief systems, different approaches to even the physicality, the breath, meditative techniques that challenge your frame of reference. This just broadens your resilience, your strength, your grace, your perspective, and ultimately your ability to be fluid through the things in life that you can't control. So, next time your teacher calls out that pose you don't like, just remember this is all part of your training for your own sovereignty. Let us know what your favorite poses are that help you get into altered states of mind, that help you get into places that show you things abstract or outside of what your normal perspective on the world is. What are some ways in which you've learned on the mat just simply by breathing, feeling, becoming aware of something in a shape that taught you something you otherwise didn't know? What was your King Arthur experience?